Over the past couple months, the Louisville coaching staff has turned the tight end position from being a glaring need to one of the best positional units on the team. On today's episode of the show, we're explaining why the tight end additions were vital to the team's success this upcoming season. That said, stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Happy Tuesday. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And as always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Over the past month or so, we've highlighted how the Cardinals have really addressed the team's needs through the transfer portal. And one position that really stands out, dramatically speaking, going from being a glaring need to one of the best positional units on the team now, is the tight end spot. We'll talk about how Brohm transformed that unit. We'll also give you recruiting updates for 2025 Louisville targets, Vernell Brown III and Tyler Kielmeyer. So two highly sought-after recruits that the Cardinals are prioritizing. So we'll start out in the transfer portal. Louisville, second straight offseason in which they've been deemed one of the top winners of the portal. And it was a mixture of addressing starting positional needs and also adding to the team's overall depth. And I think that when you stack the 2023 and 2022 classes together, I would give the nod to 2023 overall because I feel like the talent numbers overall are there. And you're adding players that I feel like, now, this is no disrespect to the 2022 class at all, but even after the class was finished, it still felt like there were some needs. Jeff Brohm and company left no stone unturned in terms of the needs for the team. And one spot coming into the offseason that I felt like was a top priority was the tight end position. It was a spot that had minimal production in 2023. I think tight ends accounted for less than 40 catches and 400 yards, like 5 touchdowns or something like that, split between Joey Gatewood, Nate Kariski, etc., Josh Livson, some other names. So it was going to be key for the Cardinals to really, really prioritize this position throughout the offseason, and they did so almost right away. Mark Redmond, the San Diego State star tight end, ended up committing to the Cardinals early on in the offseason, early December, I believe. And he's a player that by himself had more receiving yards than the tight end position as a whole for the Cardinals last year. Now, I understand that the offensive identity of the Cardinals team that utilized running the football and throwing to Jamari Thrash, there weren't that many opportunities. After all, you can only throw the ball to so many players. The rock can only be passed around so much. So I understand where the rebuttal would come from, but still, I feel like the tight end position is one that Jeff Brohm, historically speaking, when you look at his time at Western Kentucky, at Purdue, it's a position that really has a ton of focus in the offseason, in the offense, both blocking purposes and receiving as well. So there's no really there was no doubt coming into the offseason that Louisville wasn't just going to add one player. And they ended up adding multiple guys. Not only did they add Mark Redmond, they went out and they got Isaiah Cummings, the Kentucky transfer, 502 native that graduated from my alma mater, Louisville Male High School. And then flex tight end hybrid Jaleel Skinner, very highly rated player coming out of high school, sort of fell out of the depth chart for Miami. The role was sort of undefined. This move for the Cardinals, high risk, low reward. And I like the addition here for depth purposes. And then not to mention low 4-star, high 3-star 2024 signee Dylan Mesman from the state of Michigan, had a ton of Power 5 interest. He will be joining this this position overall. And not to mention Nate Kariski back, Jamari Johnson, the two players returning that you can point to and say, yeah, those two guys are probably going to get some time this season. So the position going from being a glaring need to one of the strongest positional units on the team is not something that Jeff Brohm took lightly. In an article written by Matt McGavick, actually, I think last week, he says, and the title of the article is Jeff Brohm calls Louisville tight end transfer additions vital to our success. In his post-National Signing Day press conference, when asked about the tight end position, he says, I think that position is vital to our success. Goes on to say, when you look into a lot of great football teams, a lot of great NFL teams, they have great tight ends. You have to have somebody that can control inside the hashes, can stretch the field vertically if you have to, make physical catches in between linebackers and safeties. And we want that. So we've worked hard to, at least on paper, improve that position. And on paper, they did just that. As I pointed out that tidbit just a second ago about Mark Redmond having more receptions this season than the Louisville Cardinals at the position as a whole, it speaks volumes. 6'6", 255 pounds. He caught 37 passes for 394 yards and 3 scores last season. Actually led San Diego State in all of those categories. Second team All Mountain West guy. He will be on multiple watch lists this season as he plays another year of college football. And even though he's coming from a non-Power 5 conference, I still feel like that skill set is going to be directly translatable, both blocking and receiving. He's going to be on paper tight end 1 heading into the spring. Now, I know that there has been concern or confusion, I should say is a better way to put it, as to whether or not he's going to be on campus for the spring or for the summer. I think it's probably more likely for the summer, if I'm not mistaken. Regardless, when he arrives, he's going to be a player that is focused on a ton. He will be the number 1 tight end for the team. Jaleel Skinner and Isaiah Cummings are two X factors for this position because they can take the ceiling to the next level. I see Cummings as more of a blocker than Skinner, but they are both sort of more so hybrid guys rather than true tight ends that are utilized to block. Skinner, 6'5", 210 pounds, has a ton of talent. Alex Dono of Locked On Hurricanes stated that the talent is there. It's just a matter of unlocking that. And I think that Louisville has the opportunity to do so. He's going to have multiple years of collegiate eligibility remaining. The former Alabama commit turned Miami signee, now in the portal, joins the team and is wanting to prove himself as a pass catcher. I think that he has the skill set to where you can line him up out wide. You can put him in the slot. I don't necessarily look at him as being a traditional blocker, but with the way that Brohm has been known to run 2 tight end sets on offense, it makes sense to have a guy like Redmond, have a guy like Mesman, Kariski, even Jamari Johnson, and put Skinner in that receiving role. The same thing for Isaiah Cummings. I think Cummings is a little bit better of a blocker, 6'3", 232 pounds, from my alma mater, Louisville Male High School. Only caught 4 passes for 98 yards, and all that production came against Louisville and South Carolina. So unfortunately, he tore up the Cardinals, but I still think that this is going to be a prove-it year for him. And if you can have a player like Joey Gatewood go from 0 catches to playing a pivotal role on this offensive unit, the same can be said for Isaiah Cummings. And then you have some other guys returning. Dwayne Martin is very solid at blocking. I think he's going to be used in run situations. Nate Kariski was probably the most consistent of the tight end spot this past season. He's going to have a good campaign, I feel. And then Jamari Johnson, talent-wise, he probably has the highest upside of anyone on the or in the position, I should say. And I think that if the blocking is able to come around, then he's going to be playing some. Dylan Mesman, maybe not playing all that much this season, considering how crowded the room is, but the talent is there for the 4-star prospect. So you have legitimately, you have the 3 transfers, 3 returning guys, and Mesman. That's 7 legitimate options that Louisville can run at the tight end spot, something that they didn't even have half of that this past year. So something that really should not be overlooked. And I understand it's not a position that gets a ton of hype or recognition. Everyone focuses on the skill positions like running back and wide receiver and quarterback, and then the defensive side of the ball. But make no mistake about it, Jeff Brohm calls it how it is. Tight end is vital to what the Cardinals want to do this season, and I think you're going to see how well the Cardinals did this offseason in the portal pay dividends here in a couple months, starting on August 31st against Austin Peay. The season is almost 6 months away. It seems so far away, but the Cardinals played their last game. Actually, I think it was 2 months ago today in the Holiday Bowl. It was December 27th, I believe. So we're getting there slowly but surely, but we will continue to talk about football as the offseason progresses. But let's transition over to the recruiting side of things. We have talked about multiple recruits, scheduling visits, cutting lists. One top player from the state of Florida that has included Louisville in his list cut, Vernell Brown III, electric wide receiver from the Orlando, Florida area. He could be the next best Cardinal great if he were to join the program. But we're going to talk about where his recruitment stands here momentarily after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, FanDuel. Get buckets on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. For me, I love the same game parlays. That is the main draw to FanDuel for me. New customers can get $100 or $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with the quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Cardinal fans, just a reminder that the Locked On Podcast Network has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Heading on in to the second segment of the show, we're diving into the recruiting side of things. Vernell Brown III is the latest prospect from the state of Florida that we will discuss. He recently cut his list. Now, it is a top 11, and as I mentioned, can't really put too much stock into it because it's almost like a glorified offer sheet, and it is what it is, but it is significant that Louisville was included. Some in-state flavor here: Florida State, Florida, Miami, and UCF. And then you have out-of-state teams: Ohio State, Florida State, Tennessee, Alabama, Stanford, Clemson, Louisville, and Syracuse. In an article from Steve Wiltfong of 247sports.com, here's a quote from Brown himself: "The Big Four in Florida, I consider UCF a part of that. They've done a really good job," Brown's father says. Ohio State has done a good job. Bama, to be honest, everybody in there has done a good job. That's why they're in there. Those schools have made it known that he's a priority for them, in some cases a top priority. The family is navigating spring visits, which include a trip to Ohio State. They're getting one on the books for Louisville, and of course, they're going to hit the in-state programs. They're getting one on the books for Syracuse. And I would assume that Louisville will obviously be in that mix as well. Louisville is mentioned that the Cardinals are making him feel like a top priority. Junior year, 1,404 rushing yards, over 2,000 all-purpose yards, 12 receiving touchdowns, 16 total touchdowns. So he also apparently could have the skill set to play in the secondary as well. But the 249th best player in the 24/7 Sports composite rankings, is an absolute gamer. 5'11" wide receiver, plays at Jones High School in a talented Orlando, Florida area. Is a human highlight reel. Every time he touches the ball, electricity. He is fantastic in space, and it's one of those situations where I wish the highlight tape was a little longer because, I mean, this guy is electric. Andrew Ivins, director of scouting in the Southeast for 24/7 Sports, says that Brown is a dynamic athlete with elite short area quickness and explosive movement patterns, has impacted the game in all three phases at the prep level, and impressed at times as a defensive back, but ceiling appears to be highest as a slot receiver that can generate chunk plays with his run after catch capabilities. Goes on to highlight how good he does on in breaking routes, creating separation. Catch radius projects as a potential game breaker on Saturdays. And will add plenty of value as a return man. Also competes in track, state qualifier in the triple jump. So very athletic, very quick. And it seems like that is the MO of wide receivers and defensive backs in Florida, is that a lot of these players also run track. The speed is there. And ultimately, I think that that's one ingredient that this Louisville team, if you told me in the offseason or asked me in the offseason, what does Louisville need to add the most of? It wouldn't be a position, in my opinion. It would be an aspect, speed. The Cardinals need to be quicker on both sides of the football, especially on the offensive end. The team didn't have a ton of explosiveness this year, and they went out and they got Colin Lacey, and they got Ja'Cory Brooks. And I feel like that's going to really pay dividends to address that point, to address the lack of speed. And one thing that I would like to see moving forward, not only in the high school classes, but also transfer portal, is Louisville continuing to address speed. Now, that's not only found in the state of Florida. Do not get me wrong. I'm not saying that you have to go into Florida to get your wide receivers and defensive backs. I'm not saying that, but it doesn't hurt that you go into a very talented area and get a player that is known for having that speed. And I think that the highlight reel tells you how it is. And I mean, he is a fantastic player. So, like a lot of these players, I'm going to feel like a broken record here by saying that the main focus has to be getting this player on campus, not only for spring ball, also for an official visit. Like Cameron White will be scheduling coming up shortly. Cameron White, the edge rusher that we talked about on yesterday's episode of the show. Brown is going to be extremely tough to take out of the state. His father played defensive back at Florida from 01 to 05, and apparently has served in a variety of different off-field roles at Florida from 18 to 23, and now is Anthony Richardson's manager, which is pretty interesting. So there are the ties to the Gators program, like there are for Keon Young, who we talked about yesterday. But that's the battle for these highly ranked in-state players, is that you have to, have as much firepower as you can in terms of convincing, because it's going to be tough to take a player out of the state of Florida. But every player is different, as Brian Smith alluded to, and Brian will be on the show for the I think it's going to be the Thursday episode, and he'll talk about some Florida players that Louisville is recruiting and that are trying to make their way on campus. But he said it once, he'll say it again. Recruiting in the state of Florida is pretty interesting, because as much as there are trends here and there, it's also sort of not a trend as well. Like, they're pretty unpredictable talking about Florida recruits. So you have to be able to just go into the recruitment and try to build the relationship. Do everything you can to try to convince a player that, hey, look, Louisville is the move. Let's go out of state, and you have the best chance to play early. That is one factor. You can make good NIL money, which is atop of a lot of recruits' lists. And we can get you to the NFL. And you can play in a system for Vernell Brown Jr., or Vernell Brown III, my apologies, a slot receiver in Jeff Brohm's offense. It's a match made in heaven. I mean, Jeff Brohm's offense is very electric when it is in the full swing of things, and there's no doubt, in my opinion, that he could succeed tenfold for the Cardinals and for his draft stock moving forward. So, I do want to now, for the first time in a little while, leave the state of Florida, area that we've been talking about a lot in terms of recruiting. Because if you listen to this podcast over the past week, it's like, okay, is all global recruiting the state of Florida? No, they're actually, having a little bit of a wider net in terms of search than you might anticipate. Going up to Ohio, they got a commitment from offensive lineman Jake Cook. Now they're trying to get a recruit from the same town that Cook is from in Westerville, Ohio. We'll talk about a tight end prospect that you need to know about that will be on campus here in less than a month, coming up shortly after we talk about our friends over at Gametime. Take the guesswork out of Gametime. It is my number one ticketing service. If you download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON, you'll get $20 off of your first purchase. A lot of the reasons why I like Gametime: you have your all-in seat views, your all-in pricing, the last-minute guarantee. So if you find tickets in the same section and roll for less, you will be refunded the difference. And you're looking at live reflecting prices, and prices update quickly. They even stay on the portal up to 30 minutes after the game has started. So do yourself a favor, download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, heading into the final segment of the show, Tyler Kielmeyer has set spring visits. The three-star tight end will be on campus at Louisville on March 23rd. Kielmeyer is currently not ranked in the 24/7 Sports composite, but on 24/7 Sports ranked as a three-star prospect, 31st best tight end, 27th best player in the state of Ohio. He has some Power 5 offers to boast: Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Pittsburgh, Purdue, Rutgers, Boston College, Cincinnati, Louisville, Michigan State, Minnesota, West Virginia, Wisconsin. So the trend here is that pretty much all of his offers are geographically in the Midwest heading into the Northeast. So a lot of Big Ten flavor, local area: Louisville, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. There's a lot of just Midwest flavor in this recruitment. He will be making his way onto campus on March 23rd. He is from the same city, Westerville, Ohio, as current offensive line commitment Jake Cook. Cook goes to Westerville North, Kielmeyer, Westerville South. 6'7", 235 pounds. Has the solid size. Will probably need to add a little bit of weight at the college ranks, probably into that 255 range. He has a frame that it looks like if he were to add weight, he wouldn't lose the speed, adding the strength, and should have no issues adding 10 to 20 pounds to be able to play at the next level. But you look at where this position will be in 2025, you're going to lose Mark Redmond. You're going to lose probably a couple of other guys, Isaiah Cummings. There's two players right off the bat. And adding a guy like Kielmeyer, who wouldn't be required to come and play right away, sort of take the Dylan Mesman, Jamari Johnson route, to where year one's probably not going to be a ton of playing time. You learn, you get your body right, you add more strength, you add more weight, you learn the playbook, and by year two, you're ready to go. And I think that you're going to see this season, in the way that the tight end position is utilized for the Cardinals, that it's going to become an attractive destination for highly ranked tight ends moving forward. This is a spot in Ohio that's, I believe Westerville is just south of Columbus, and it's a solid talent area. So I expect that this, once again, we talk about South Florida, we talk about local recruiting. Make no mistake about it, is that Jeff Brohm is going to not only prioritize those areas, but try to create pipelines elsewhere. one reason that I've been a little envious of the program down the road is because of the pipeline that they've created into the state of Ohio and some of the players that they've got from that area. And I really think that being able to go in and do that, or do the same thing. Benny Snell is a player that comes to mind from the state of Ohio, from the Columbus area, that Kentucky was able to go get. Kentucky's been able to win some big time recruiting battles in the area. And if Louisville's getting to a spot to where they are at least contending in Columbus, contending in Cincinnati, I understand you're not going to win all of them, but if you get, 3 to 4 or 5 commitments from the Ohio area, I was about to say a portal cycle, a high school cycle, I feel like that's a pretty good number because it's a pretty decently talented area. Ohio is a very underrated area of recruiting talent that doesn't really get a lot of attention outside of the Midwest corridor, from like Missouri on up to like Wisconsin to Pennsylvania down to like Tennessee. So you're contending with teams like Ohio State, Penn State, Kentucky, Notre Dame, etc., which those teams are no slouches, but it seems like there's not as much SEC flavor as until late. They have sort of gotten more into the mix historically, but I think that Kielmeyer, when you watch his skill set, reminds me a little bit. I'm going to go and say Gerald Everett. As you all know, I'm a Los Angeles Chargers fan, and you're thinking, Gerald Everett, what in the world? The way that Everett plays is that he's not going to wow you like tight ends probably won't, but underrated in blocking and has a very deceiving second level speed, athletic, good job like inside 10 yards. And I've seen situations where Everett was used in screen game. And I think that that could be the same situation for a guy like Kielmeyer as well, at times, if everything goes right in his development. So it'll be interesting to see. Like I said, Kielmeyer will be making his way onto campus March 23rd. I think that tight end could be a spot that the Cardinals add 2 players. They wanted to add Tanner Koziel. He ended up staying at Ball State. They got Jaleel Skinner to commit instead in his absence. You're going to lose multiple players at the spot anyway. So I could see Louisville adding maybe 1 high school tight end, 1 transfer, or, 2 high school tight ends, because you have depth at the position and projectable starting guys in the future. But definitely one to focus on, Kielmeyer is, and a wide receiver to focus on in Vernell Brown III. Tomorrow's episode of the show, there actually won't be one that airs Wednesday. Technically, this will replace the Wednesday edition of the show. I will record a Wednesday episode with Locked On Podcast National Recruiting analyst Brian Smith. We'll talk through some more recruiting updates, and you'll hear from him on the ins and outs of recruitments in South Florida. So be sure to stay tuned. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here